Hello, and welcome back to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering podcast. This is episode 5, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, James. How's it going, dude?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I've just got back from playing squash for the first time in quite a while. I'm apparently too old and unfit, and it's not gone well. But we're
Well, I've just got back from a gentle walk, and I've also more shagged out than I should be. So yeah, I'm feeling my mid-30s power flip.
Let's go back to a natural habitat of sitting around and talking about magic.
Yeah, quite right. Well, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, we have a great episode for you all listening today. For our main topic, we're going to be talking about some of our favorite pet cards from Commander, some cards that we just can't leave behind, cards that despite them maybe not being the best, we love putting them in decks, and yeah, we're going to chat about them and share them with you. There will be time codes down in the description below if you want to jump around. But for our first section, we're going to be starting with the news. So the main thing that's happened in the last couple of weeks, kind of following up from our last episode where we spoke about Standard being extended to 3 years, we had the kind of expected Standard bans. There were 3 cards banned in Standard. We had Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Reckon a Bankbuster, and Invoke Despair. So we'll kind of, I guess, go through them one by one. So Fable of the Mirror Breaker, James, I'm assuming that's just banned because it's just very, very good and very, very strong.
Yes, this was the one I think that was, if they hadn't banned this, it would have been a pretty shocking decision. This card's just too good for Standard. It does too many things for too little mana. It snowballs really well. The difference between being on the play with a Fable and without is absolutely huge. It kind of demands 2 removal spells and still gets you value, which is far more than you can realistically get for 3 mana in Standard. Both creatures do a lot. It fixes your draw. They couldn't leave this card in the format, I don't think.
No, exactly. The fact that it's a really powerful card in everything, as far as I can tell, apart from Vintage. I had just quickly looked on MTG Goldfish just to double check if anyone was jamming it there. But yeah, it sees plays in basically every format that it's legal in.
I have registered a Vintage League with Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I'd just like to add.
Good.
You shouldn't.
Well, yeah, you can easily transfer your. Yeah. Oh, you okay? Yeah, as you said, I think it's fair. It's just a very, very strong card that's just dripping with value. The next one, Reckon a Bankbuster. When I saw this initially, I've mainly played this in limited or maybe a couple of Commander decks. I was never kind of blown away by the power value, but I'm kind of assuming it's just it's from the articles. This reminds me of Smuggler's Copter in that it's just a good value artifact that's just kind of played in so many decks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I think it being colorless makes it kind of universal. I'll be honest, I was a little surprised by this one, but I do understand it. I think one of the big things for me with this card is that it kind of invalidates control decks because it just comes down too early to get under their counter spells, and then if your opponent just passes with counterspell mana up, well, then you're just going to draw cards and not let them use their counterspell, and it's pretty hard for control decks to fight through that. And it's a gets under a counterspell, draws 3 cards, and leaves a threat behind. That's quite a lot. It does that very slowly. It's not like a busted card. It's nowhere near the power level of Fable. So yeah, I think it's quite universal. If we're having this Standard for another 2 years, do we really want this card in it the whole time? People are going to get sick of it, and maybe it is a bit too good against the blue control decks. But yeah, I think it would have been fine probably to leave in the format, but I think just shaking up the format has some benefits as well, especially if we do with this slower rotation. So yeah, I think perfectly reasonable ban for sure.
No, it makes sense, yeah. And I'm actually only just spotting that all of our bans are from the same, from Kamigawa, which is one of the earliest sets in Standard right now. The last one, you're going to have to go over with me why this card was powerful enough to get banned in Standard. But Invoke Despair, the card that's 1 quad black to cast, of all the black cards to be banned in Standard, Shieldred was higher on my like bingo card than this, but
Yeah, so this card was, I think, probably the most surprising for bans for me. It does, yeah, I agree. It doesn't read as super powerful, but I think the way this plays out is pretty strong actually, because you're generally like, as a good baseline, you're gonna kill something, draw 2 cards, and they lose 4. That is a lot for 5 mana. Like in any mid-range mirror, that goes over the top really hard. And I think probably one of the it also has some weird incentives in terms of deck building, which I think they probably don't like for a card that's being heavily played in the format. It really disincentivizes you from putting a variety of types in your deck if this card is
okay, yeah.
prevalent in the format. Like you can't, like if you're like playing a mid-range deck and you're like, oh, this 5 mana Planeswalker is pretty sweet, I'm going to put like 2 of them in as a top end. That makes Invoke Despair so much better because it just gets that Planeswalker almost for free. It denies them a card, but it's getting a 5 mana Planeswalker off you for free. So it incentivizes you to not put that Planeswalker in your deck and just put another creature in instead. The same with interesting build around enchantments. Something like Spirit Sisters Call maybe is a card I've seen people like try and build around at some points, but it just gets so punished by this, right? So I think those incentives aren't great, and it's removal that, yes, it's expensive, but it's never dead. It's always going to be good on every board. If you get 3 things, it's good. If your opponent doesn't have a board and you deal 6 to them and draw 3 cards, that's also great. So yeah, I think obviously it's a 5 mana spell that's hard to cast. It's not like the defining card of the format, but it is a strong card in the format which has, you could argue, a kind of warping effect on the metagame. So I think maybe that's why they banned it.
Cool. So yeah, so those 3 bans all kind of make sense. Shake up the format a little bit. Obviously, Reckoner Bankbuster can kind of go in anything, but like Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Invoke Despair definitely seem to have been cards from like what I believe was the most played deck anyway, which was like a red-black kind of sacrificey value good stuff kind of deck. I'm assuming with these being banned, that's going to shake up the meta to kind of make other things a bit better. Like, so I guess firstly, like, James, do you think red-black is just dead now, or?
I wouldn't say that. I can't imagine many people will be playing just Rakdos good cards. I think that deck loses too much. And honestly, a huge amount of the reason to be red was Fable of Mirror Breaker. Like the Blood Type Harvester is a really good card, but I don't think Rakdos midrange will be. I definitely don't think it will be amongst most played decks. I could see maybe something in the sacrifice space in Rakdos with Obnixless. That could be interesting to try. But I think the obvious winners to me from this announcement are there's an Esper Legends deck, which utilizes cards like the Fiend and Shieldred and just really good cards all the way down the curve. And I think that deck does really well out of this ban announcement. I think Shieldred is one of the most notable cards they didn't ban and could have done. So that's I think is a winner. There's some vamp decks that are good. There's Soldiers that's a good aggro deck. But I think it's certainly a huge shake-up to a format. I think these were pretty. I mean, certainly Bankbuster and Fable were pretty defining cards. Not just in they were in every deck, but also like every deck had to take account of these cards so much when you build your deck. But I think it opens up a lot of use places, and that's pretty cool. I think that's what they want to achieve. They're leaving some very powerful cards in, which I think is fine. I think cards like the Wandering Emperor and Shieldred, everyone might be sick of in a year. We'll see. But I think this is a decent ban announcement. I like where they're going with this. It's interesting with their new setup that they're kind of locked into not banning anything for another year. So I guess we really hope it works out. But it looks good to me. It looks like definitely a big shakeup on old standard.
No, awesome. Actually, I guess probably worth actually mentioning that yearly ban and restrict announcement thing. That's not this one. This is like I guess that yearly ban and restricted thing doesn't have like that one comes into place on August the 7th. That's when that's their first. Everything is now this for a year. Yeah, it's just it's when rotation would have been.
Oh,
basically.
I see. Oh, I thought this was the yearly one. Right, that is worth mentioning.
Yeah, no. Well, I think part of it is I'm assuming that part might have been in the documentation, but yeah, I definitely remember reading that kind of there's going to be one more ban and then you're done for the year, and they made a load of bans, so I think it was probably safe to assume like that was it for the year. But yeah, keep standard players. August the 7th is the date you need to keep in your heads. That is the day of the annual ban and restricted announcement. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll touch base with everyone then, see what sticks around. Maybe Shieldred will go then, I guess, is the
yeah, could well happen. See how it plays out. But I mean, Shieldred is just a 4-mana creature that if you kill, it doesn't do a lot, right? It's very good if it lives. It's very, very good if it lives. But how good could a 4-mana creature without an ETB be? I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, completely right. Yeah. If you don't get your value straight away, what's the point?
Exactly.
Awesome. Right, for our second bit of news, we have the upcoming Lord of the Rings set. So pre-release is the weekend of the 16th to the 18th. So that's in about a week at time of recording, for about a week after people are hearing this, and then the release is obviously going to be the week after that. I don't know about you, James, but I am super hyped for this set. Like, obviously, we'll be doing a cube set review for the set. That will probably have to be 2 parts because there's quite a lot of stuff I want to talk about. James, you're definitely going to be talking me down on cards that I think are cool and lore awesome. We'll focus on the playables, I promise you. I'm not going to give you another Boris Equipment Matters one unless there's a very, very good one. I guess we'll see. Are you excited for this set, James? Like, in terms of like Lord of the Rings, does it resonate with you? Like, are you as in as I am on this set?
Yeah, so I'm pretty psyched for the set. I think it looks cool. It is IP that I grew up with. I really loved Lord of the Rings growing up. Love the books, love the films. I don't massively engage with Magic through the like being really into the storyline and everything. I think a few of the cards stood out to me as like that's legit really cool. Great flavor. Most of the cards I'm just like, oh, that's cool as a Magic card. I don't massively care that it's like a Lord of the Rings card instead of a card from Innistrad or whatever. But there's a few of them I think are really fun and clever, and a bunch that are just cool Magic cards that I'm excited to play with. I think it's very much seems to me as a commander set first and foremost, rather than anything else. I know people are thinking there were going to be a lot more modern cards in here. I think it's completely fine that there aren't. I think that format doesn't need a whole bunch of new powerful cards adding, and there's some really cool commander cards which I'm sure people will try and fail with in modern a few times, and that's cool too.
Oh, definitely, yeah, kind of, yeah. On the power level, there is definitely like I guess aimed more at commander. There's a few cards like there's a sprinkling of kind of like powerful uncommons I think could kind of see like utility play, but yeah, it's not like I don't think like Gandalf is going to be breaking like modern open or anything like that, which is probably a good spot basically. But from my end, I am like I guess I'm kind of a bit the opposite. Like with the Vorthos stuff, like I don't get too much into it with the actual Magic storyline because like every now and then something will click, but a lot of the time the Magic storyline isn't that good. I don't know if that's a hot take or not. Like I don't know if you've actually kind of paid attention to the really early like the Thran and all the really early stuff. It's just not phenomenal, if I'm honest with you. And like they've done some cool stuff recently, kind of like big team ups and that kind of stuff. But I guess they are kind of doing stuff we've seen in like other media, because like the March of the Machine was basically like everyone knows that was just Endgame. Like it literally, if their cycle is 2 years, it came out 2 years after Endgame, all that kind of stuff. But like for me, the Warhammer stuff and the Lord of the Rings stuff has really kind of hit. Like I am obscenely excited, and I'm going to be spending way too much cash on this set. Yeah, there's been some just really cool cards. Like obviously we'll go through kind of like the powerful ones and kind of like the ones we think will actually kind of like make an impact to cube in our set review. But just like you have cards like Shadowfax. It's Gandalf's horse, and I'm pretty sure it's in the books, but in the film there's the famous line, Shadowfax, show us the meaning of haste. And Shadowfax has haste, and for one of the few times they have actually put the descriptive text of what haste does on the card. So Shadowfax is literally showing us the meaning of haste. Like touches like that are very, very nice. There is obviously one massive exception to the flavor, which is the One Ring itself not actually having any downside when it tempts you. But I could probably get over that if the mechanic is good.
The mechanic's weird to me. I think they've done the dungeon thing enough now.
Yeah, I agree.
I know this isn't dungeons explicitly, but it's very, very similar. People used to make the reading the card explains the card. It very much doesn't anymore.
Yeah, 100%. You need an additional... you literally need an additional card to explain the card now.
Exactly. So I could live without that bit. But I agree. I think there are some really cool, flavorful cards in. And I think Lord of the Rings is probably... It's easier for them to make those flavorful cards and for them to hit. Because with Magic... Unless you're someone who actually goes and reads the books and actively tries to find out about the storyline, either the characters are people you don't know, in which case it's hard for a flavor to hit, or it's like the 50th Chandra card, and there's only so many things you can make Chandra do in a flavorful way, and at some point it's just how many. It's hard for those to really resonate, Whereas seeing that's actually like Gimli's jam summed up in a card is kind of cool.
No, definitely. Yeah. Expect more discussion and content from the Lord of the Rings as we kind of get close to the time. Well, let's move on to our main topic of the day. Our main topic is Commander pet cards. As I kind of mentioned, these are cards that maybe they aren't the strongest, but they are cool, and we, I guess, have some kind of attachment to them, meaning that we keep finding ourselves coming back to them. So to break the algorithm wide open, we both got our, I'm not going to say top 11, but basically we have both naturally picked 11 each. So we'll be going through them kind of back and forth and talking about them, why we like them, and I guess kind of like where they're good, and maybe kind of selling them to you, the listener, as to why you should give them a go, and maybe they can become your new pet card as well. So James, do you want to take it away with your first couple?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so for the first slot, I've cheated slightly by choosing two, but they both do exactly the same thing, so I think I can get away with it. They are Recycle and Null for Fusion. They are color-shifted versions of the same effect. So Recycle is 4 green for an enchantment. It says, skip your draw step. Not a great start. However, when you play a card, you draw a card. So play a card is play a spell or play a land. However, your maximum hand size is 2. And Recycle is 4 black for exactly the same effect. So this lets you motor through your deck really, really quickly. Just every land drawing you a card, as well as every spell drawing you a card, is pretty absurd. You basically never run out of things to do with your mana, and you never miss a land drop. It's when you have one of these going, your turns feel so powerful. The downside is obviously really big in terms of your maximum hand size is 2. However, there are some ways around this. Firstly, you can just be doing so much on the board that this is a good card for you anyway. That's certainly fine. But if you do want to play a game where you build up cards in your hand, there's ways to do that as well. So most importantly, because this effect is time-stamped, if you play a Recycle and then afterwards you play a different effect that modifies your hand size, that other effect will override this.
Oh, very cool.
So probably the easiest way to do that is Reliquary Tower, which is the colorless land that means you have no maximum hand size. If you play a Recycle and then a Reliquary Tower, you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, and you still have this Recycle going. It's super powerful. It actually means they go very nicely in land decks, because this is really good with effects that let you play extra lands, and your land deck is good at finding Reliquary Tower. But you can definitely put them in other decks as well. I've gone so deep as to put Library of Leng in a deck before, which is a 1-mana artifact, which just gives you no maximum hand size. I'm not sure I'd recommend that, but the card's a lot of fun. It's probably worth saying at the top. I think we tend to play not super powerful commander decks. Like our general commander play group is it's nowhere near CDH stuff. You do have time to set up, so obviously some of these cards would be less good in a more powerful environment. But yeah, I think this is a really cool effect. I don't know. I really enjoy playing with it.
No, yeah, this looks like a ton of fun. Like, yeah, anything with skip your draw step. There's normally going to be something good coming afterwards. And yeah, have you played both of these in the same deck before?
Oh, yes. Armia Sage of Stone deck. I've had them both in play before at the same time. It was phenomenal. I'm not sure I won the game, but I certainly took some game actions.
Yeah. You were doing a lot of things. That's cool. Yeah. I didn't clock that this works with lands. That's very cool. Yeah, you could team up with like a Zeusa or something and just start going to town.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd, because then you get to play more lands, draw more lands. It's it's when it gets going, it feels very powerful.
No, awesome. I love it. All right, if it's all right, James, I will kick off with my first card.
Yeah, go for it.
So my first pet card is a card called Vicious Shadows. It is 6 and a red for an enchantment, and whenever a creature dies, you may have Vicious Shadows deal damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. So there's a couple of interesting things with this card. Firstly, it doesn't have to be the person whose creatures died who you're dealing damage equal to the number of cards in the hand. It can be like your creatures. It can be another creature. It is whenever any creature dies. So with like a board wipe, if someone's got 5 cards in hand, they could be taking a lot of damage. Like you can kill people. What you said when you're talking about like recycle and null profusion about cards that are technically not CED, like super competitive, like I think partly we've kind of maybe we're quite an established play group. We've all kind of done the things of like tooling up, making the super busted decks. I think we've all kind of reached a point where it's like let's just have fun, let's enjoy ourselves. I can't say that Vicious Shadows is a card that other people enjoy playing against, because it yes, it's 7 mana, but this just kills people. Like there's still plenty of board wipes in Commander. By the time you're dropping this, there's normally a board state, and then if anyone does anything, they just start losing a lot of life. Like, have I played this against you, James? Have you been Vicious Shadowed out of a game before?
I've not had the pleasure yet, I don't think. I look forward to it.
Oh yes, don't worry. We can definitely change that. That's all fine. Yeah, one other thing I really like about this card is that it has a fair bit more politics than you might think to a game of Commander, because again, it can be any creature dying, and the damage goes to any player for any amount of cards in their hand. And also, I kind of, generally speaking, if at the point you played a 7 mana enchantment, the person with the most cards in their hand is normally the person who is about to win that game or is closest to winning it. So having an answer and kind of letting everyone kind of team up on them, maybe someone else is a sacrifice deck, maybe someone else has some ways of killing some creatures, you can really punish people. And yeah, kind of, I quite enjoy that aspect of it, of a little team up to bring down the king, as it were. Yeah,
for sure. Sounds pretty cool. I look forward to seeing it in a Commander game near me shortly. So I'm continuing with my next card on my theme of splashy 6 mana enchantments with Lich's Mastery. So for people who don't know this card, it is 3 black. Not the easiest thing to cast. For a legendary enchantment, it has hexproof. You've text, you can't lose the game, which is good text. I don't like losing the game, so we like it when that doesn't happen. Whenever you gain life, you draw that many cards. So this is all busted so far. You'll say there should be some downside. There certainly is. Whenever you lose life, for each 1 life you lose, exile a permanent you control or a card from your hand or graveyard. So it's basically taking you down a resource for each life you lose, taking you down a card from any zone. And eventually, if you run out of cards in all of those zones, you'll have to sacrifice for Lich's Mastery. And that's not great for you because when Lich's Mastery leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. This card's not amazing, but it's but when it really gets going, it can be really sweet. It's and it has some really nice interactions. So you can do a lot of different stuff with this. Obviously, it goes great in a life gain deck. You can just gain so much life that you can just discard cards from your hand for damage, and it's not going to be a big deal. Because you're going to have such full hand of cards. And even if you have to discard them to hand size, well, you just exile them from the graveyard for when people deal damage to you, and that works fine. It also, just for text, you can't lose the game, has some pretty interesting interactions. It makes some cards good, but are really not good otherwise. For example, cards like 9 Lives, which is whenever you take damage, you put a counter on it, and then when it has 9 counters on it, you exile it, and when it leaves, you lose the game. So that means you're not taking a bunch of damage when everyone hits you. They have to grind through the 9 lives. But when the 9 lives goes away, well, you don't lose the game because you still have Lich's Mastery, and Lich's Mastery says you can't lose the game. Similar interaction with things like Glorious End, which is 2 and a red for an instant, end the turn, at the beginning of the next turn, you lose the game. So this can actually become like really good interaction and kind of a time walk.
Keep ending the turn. Yeah.
Hey, you can't lose the game. Yeah. It does some pretty cool stuff. It leads to like really ridiculous games, which are quite fun. Quite often you lose the ridiculous games, but you know, it was about the journey, and it definitely takes you on a journey.
Well, so are you doing any kind of like self-milled as well to kind of like counteract that? Because like, obviously you don't want to be getting rid of your permanents where possible, unless you're a token deck, I guess. But like cards from your hand, like yeah, if you gain life, that could be quite full. But yeah, like the graveyard for me seems quite, shockingly for me, seems like quite an easy way of kind of like abusing this. Like, is this a...
Yeah, 100%. If you're really stocking your graveyard, it's just any way that you can get cards out of your library and into another zone is going to be good for you. So yeah, if you're taking any hits, yeah, but you're right. The graveyard is certainly the least painful zone to exile from. But the other thing can just be with the life gain clause, you can just draw so many cards that kind of does the same thing.
Yeah.
Another notable combo with this, by the way, is Approach of a Second Sun.
Oh, for God's sake, James. I'm glad to see that not on your pet list, because that card is...
No, I don't actually... That one feels a bit too easy sometimes, you know?
One of the last times I played Commander with you, there were 2 of you with Approach of the Second Sun, and it was effectively a race to see who could cast it the second time. None of that.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah, that card sometimes feels a bit too easy to me, you know. Lich's Mastery, on the other hand, is chef's kiss.
Yeah, that's quite... No, phenomenal. Right, I'm going to move it on to my next one. My next card is Champion of Lambolt. It is a creature, so it is 1 green for a human warrior, which is a 1/1. It has the text: creature with power less than Champion of Lambolt's power can't block creatures you control. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on Champion of Lambolt. So the text on this card might be a bit unassuming, but just if you're in any Green X deck with creatures that is planning on winning by attacking with creatures, I personally think you should be running Champion of Lambolt. So it gets massive by itself. If you're playing mana dogs, if you're playing tokens, or if you're just playing other creatures, it will just get bigger naturally. And then the ability to make your whole board unblockable is just obscenely good. Like similar to Vicious Shadows, this is just a very good way of actually ending games. Like it's less assuming than something like a Crater Hoof, and obviously it's not as good as a Crater Hoof because that kind of wins you in one turn. But like if this is on the board for a couple of turns and you just start putting some creatures down, it gets bigger. Like you'd be surprised at kind of just like how easy it is to swing through to people if this has like 4 or 5 power, which is not hard to do in a game of Commander. Like generally you can play this, follow it up with like 3 or 4 creatures the turn or two afterwards, and then your whole board can't be blocked by creatures with like power less than 5 or so. Like it is very, very good. I play this in way too many decks, like in token decks. Yeah, I love this card. I think this is one that people who play against me are kind of maybe a bit bored of seeing because I jam it into so many things, but I really think it's very strong.
Yeah, I've certainly seen this one in some games. Are you normally looking to have other ways of boosting its power as well, so that you can get that evasion quicker, or are you just doing it naturally normally with by playing a bunch of creatures?
So I've mainly played it in just decks with creatures. Basically, I find in Commander that just kind of just playing creatures with like enter the battlefield effects is kind of slightly more reliable than playing like equipment to kind of buff up this power. Like I could see maybe like a Voltron deck potentially running this, but I'm not sure whether the equipment or the auras would just go onto the creature I'm trying to buff up. Like Champion of Lambert really kind of sings when you have other creatures to attack with it, if that makes sense. Kind of like you're using the Champion of Lambert to kind of give the rest of your board unblockable so the whole team can swing through, if that makes sense, rather than kind of just like having decks, I think, with kind of more like equipments or something like a Rancor or something like that. Like they're not really going wide, and I think Champion of Lambert really like sings when you're going wide with creatures.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. And I guess you don't really need to get it that big often, right? Because you just want your opponent not to be able to chump block with their 1/1s and 2/2s.
No, exactly, and that's the thing. Like in those kind of creature heavy decks where you're also running things like Beast Whisperers, your card draw kind of things that when you cast a creature spell, draw a card. There's an enchantment that does something similar. Kind of just everything being on creatures. Kind of everything kind of fuels itself. Like you're going to be running some Mana Dorks to tap for mana. They make this bigger. They draw you cards off of Beast Whisperer. Kind of everything kind of comes together very nicely. The main place I like. So I have this in one of my few decks that I kind of keep together. A lot of the time I kind of will build a deck each time I play Commander, but this is like a staple in my like CDC self-mill zombie deck, just because you're just making so many tokens, you're making them unblockable with this, and yeah, you're just killing people. And obviously, if you like in those decks, in those creature heavy decks, you are still playing things like a End-Race Forerunners or a Crater Hoof. That, I guess, is the way that you're buffing up this is power when you're just killing them on that big turn, basically. You're swinging through with this. They can't even block. It makes the math all that sweeter. Like, it doesn't matter what they have to block with because it can't block you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Seems like a strong one for sure. A little too good, I'd say, for the where we've been in this list so far. I'm just over here dying with my Lich's Mastery, and you've got Champion of Lambert.
Yeah, actually, now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'm looking at Scryfall. It was printed in the starter Commander decks, so maybe everyone else is kind of. So actually, so I will say it was printed in Amazon Restored, printed in Commander 2016, and then there was a big gap until like Double Masters. So I'm in my mid-30s, but I still play a lot of Boomer Magic. Maybe this is me, like, I was onto it before it was hot, James. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, you were the Champion of Lambert hipster, were you? Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Nice,
yeah.
nice.
I liked it before it was cool.
yeah. Okay, cool. You've got a nice like sepia print of it on your living room wall to you.
Yeah.
Excellent news. Cool. So for my next card, I've gone for Cathartic Reunion, which is 1 red sorcery. As an additional cost, you discard 2 cards and you draw 3 cards. This could also be like Tormenting Voice, Faithful Fleeting. I play a lot of graveyard decks, but I'm pretty off of the like gamble entomb type tutor into your graveyards for them, because I just find you always end up getting the same thing, and then all the games play out the same. Whereas these effects, like, you get to put a bunch of cards in your graveyard, but they're just like what are the cards you drew? Oh, those ones go into your graveyard. You get to see what comes off the top, and all the games play out pretty differently. And like Cathartic Reunion kind of does everything, it fixes your hand, it fuels your graveyard, it's only 2 mana. Try really hard not to get it counterspelled. It's really bad if that happens. But
whoever's doing that is just being hateful at that point, though, James.
Yeah, but sometimes I inspire hate amongst Commander players.
Well, at least Hull Breach is banned now. You don't have to worry about that with this card.
That has actually happened to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
No.
It wasn't even against like the stupid CDH deck. It was in Blue-Red Pirates, and they just slammed a Hull Breacher in response to like Cathartic Reunion.
Technically Pirate. Yeah.
It was unpleasant. But yeah, no. I play a ton of these cards in basically all my red decks that care about the graveyard. I think they're all great, and I'll play as many of them as they print.
No, sweet. Actually, have you tried the new battle in this slot yet, out of interest?
Oh, I haven't, but it's mostly because I haven't played much of this set in paper, so I don't have one. I certainly will be. Because that's also... The backside is very good on that card.
Yeah, the backside's a looter. So sorry, I will just get up the card that with it's Invasion of...
Yeah, so this is Invasion of Mercadia, which is 1 red for battle, which is basically a tormenting voice when it ETBs. But if you flip it, you get a 3/3 where you can pay 2 and a red and discard a card to make 2 1/1s, and all of your team gets +1/+0 and haste until end of turn, I believe. That was from memory, by the way. I don't know if that was correct. I think
That's
it was, though.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, that card's really strong. It seems like it goes in most graveyard decks as basically an upgrade to these cards that I'm talking about. So yeah, seems like a good spot for sure.
Don't know if you've played with cards like Containment Construct or Conspiracy Theorist. They're both ones that let you replay they let you play the cards instead of discarding them. Like, I also have a penchant for things like Madness and that kind of stuff. Like, I've dabbled with some of those. They're very cool in those kind of decks as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've got a Jaxis deck with Containment Construct and Conspiracy Theorist, and it does they do a lot of work there. It's also really nice that they're both May, so because sometimes you actively want the card in your graveyard, not in exile, because you can't cast it, and it lets you do it either way, so that's really nice.
No, phenomenal. Yeah, I love all those little rummagey cards. Like yeah, Faithless Looting, I was tempted to put on mine, but again, I think, yeah, that's just it's just a very good card. With my next ones, I'm cheating a bit, and again, I feel I'm really cheating because I've picked 3 cards for my next one, and they're all good cards, but my argument will kind of, I think, save me a little bit. So I have gone for an Offer You Can't Refuse, which is blue for an instant, counter target non-creature spell, its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. I've also gone for Disdainful Stroke, which is 1 blue for an instant, counter target spell with mana value 4 or greater. And then Negate, good old-fashioned Negate, which is 1 blue for an instant, counter target non-creature spell. These are probably my go-to counter spells in Commander nowadays. Like, none of them are that expensive. Like, an Offer You Can't Refuse is slowly creeping up because people are realizing how good it is. But in Commander, I have generally found that these counter the spells that you actually care about countering. Like, an Offer You Can't Refuse being a single blue is just really nice. Disdainful Stroke and Negate being 1 blue mean they're very splashable. You don't need the double blue from a regular counter spell. You're going to be able to cast this in like multicolor decks. And just generally, the vast majority of times, the things you want to be countering in Commander are, or I personally find they're things like board wipes or targeted removal, things that are stopping your game plan. This isn't like single player formats where control decks can just kind of sit there countering all of your opponent's spells while drawing more cards. It's a multiplayer game. Like you physically can't counter everything because it's going to be impossible. And I have found the fact that these are all super cheap to buy. Like, Disdainful Stroke is, you can get a one for less than 4 cents. Negate, 10 cents. I have found, like, obviously things like Force of Will are better, but they're also stupid, but they're also monumentally more expensive, and I don't think you need them. Like these 3 counter spells, I think are absolutely perfect for the vast majority of commander playgroups out there. If you're not paying in like the highest echelons of power, just like these 3 will do the job that you actually want them to do. They are cheap and they're very easy to cast.
Yeah, 100% agree with all of it. I think these were all great. I really like an offer you can't refuse. The difference between 1 and 2 is huge because, like as you say, you don't want to be just using these to trade for a good card from your opponent. You want the card to stop the card that will either win them the game or set you back a really long way. So which means often you're like holding them up for multiple turns, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you can't just be burning 2 mana every turn in case they play something you want to counter often. So an offer you can't refuse, you just have up more of the time that you need it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also there is the weird psychological thing of if people see 2 blue untapped, they think you have the counterspell, where people do not expect counterspells for a single blue or 1 in a blue. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, maybe it's just a thing that we've had browbeaten into us over the years of losing to counterspells and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I really like these cards.
Nice. Yeah, seems good.
Cool. This is my only one with 3. I have a couple more with 2, but this is
3 is pretty egregious.
3 is egregious. But they're all very cheap, and that was that's my excuse anyway.
Okay, I think that's fair. I'll allow it. Cool. My next one is just 1 card because I followed the rules, guys.
All right.
Next up, I have 1,000-Year Elixir. So first, you don't know, this is 3 generic mana for an artifact. It has, you may play the activated abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. And you can pay 1 and tap it to untap target creature. So this plays really well with creatures with tap abilities, as you might imagine. You get to both use those abilities the turn they enter, and you get to double up on one of them. I put this in basically any deck where my commander has a tap ability, which I want to activate. I'm playing this card. It just powers it up so much because it means you're not just running out your commander hoping to untap with it before you start getting value. And obviously the same is true if you just have a lot of cards in your 99 like that. But I think it's most useful if it's your commander because you will play that multiple times a game. Especially like later in the game when you're you have a lot of mana, you can just play your commander, use the activated ability twice. It's really, really strong. Assuming you built a good commander deck where your commander's abilities do things. I just find this powers up those decks loads, and I like a lot of those decks. So this tends to make it in quite a lot for me. Because it's also you can even start if you have untap artifact effects. You can untap this, and you can do it again. You can at some point you can really go off with this card. Also, obviously, good with mana elves. Like play your Rathalos, activate it. I'm sure is Rathalos is banned.
Rathalos is very banned in Commander, my dude.
Rathalos is banned, I guess, for a good reason. I'll be honest, I don't play. I'm never playing mono green in Commander anyway. I was just thinking of other things people might want to use with this card. But I enjoy using it for little value creatures with good activated abilities, and it does a lot of work there. Would recommend it to anyone if your deck needs you to activate ability of your commander specifically.
No, definitely, and just the fact that it's colorless means it can kind of just fill the slots that decks that don't have access to things with haste naturally. So like you mentioned, is it Jaxis? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Jaxis is great in.
But like that one is like you're in red. There's more haste effects. I'm kind of like with decks like what's there's the one that's basically like a birthing pod.
Time Speaker Manafar.
That's it. Like in colors that don't normally get haste. The fact that it can kind of just can power up so many different decks because it is colorless is really nice. And effectively, you are doubling something up. Like I'm not saying it's doubling season, but it does it does a similar job. It like effectively doubles an ability you want to double, so that's very strong.
Yeah, 100%. I will say it does get worse if the ability also involves paying a lot of mana and tapping your creature. So, for example, I have it in a Gen deck, and it's good there, but it's less great. Gen being you can pay Mardu mana and tap and sack an enchantment to return an enchantment from your graveyard. But it is less great there because, to actually use that ability twice, you're paying a total of 7 mana with this, which means you're not doing a lot else for your turn. But if it's cheap activated abilities, I think Pipespeak of Anfar is a really good example. It's going to be one of the better cards in your deck.
Awesome. All right, from one 3-mana artifact to another 3-mana artifact. My next one is in here mainly because I'm a little bit lazy when I'm playing, and I also generally play Magic in the pub. I'm talking about Chromatic Lantern. This is probably one a lot of people will know, but for those who don't, Chromatic Lantern is 3 generic mana for an artifact. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and it itself taps for 1 mana of any color. So I know the general consensus is that 3-mana Mana Rocks is not where you want to be anymore. People want them on 1 and 2, more consistent, less big mana ones, that kind of thing. But my argument is always just the quality of life improvement you have with this, specifically in kind of like 3+ color decks. Like you don't need this in a 1 or 2 color deck, but in any 3 color deck, just having your fixing done, poof, you don't have to worry about it. Everything is fine. It definitely won't get blown up, and then you have to think about it. That won't happen. Everything's okay. Just have the Chromatic Lantern, have another pint, it'll be okay. You can play Magic, everything is fixed. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, I think I also play a lot of this card, and it's exactly that reason. It's also, I think, it's not like pennies, but it's not an expensive card. I think it's like £5-6. But it's good. It's better if you have not spent lots and lots of money on your mana base.
Exactly. Yes.
And I certainly haven't, because I have a lot of for good fixing lands, but most of the time they're in constructed decks, and I'm not going to go and spend loads of money on lands for Commander. When I'm spending money on on the occasion I do spend money on my Commander decks, I'm buying the cards that let me do something really cool in my Commander deck. I'm not very interested in just my lands untapped more of the time, or I have more consistent access to my colors. So the Commander mana base I build tend to be a little bit scrappy, and Chromatic Lantern does just solve all the problems, right?
No, exactly. Yeah. You're talking to someone who once had like 8 Sultai decks put together, and the mana bases at the start of that journey were very, very tuned and wonderful. But then by the time you get to like the 6th or 7th deck, you are scraping the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of your playable pile. So yeah, Chromatic Lantern does God's work as far as I'm concerned in those situations.
Yeah, 100%. I've played more Scoured Barons in my life than I would like to admit.
Yeah. And there is also there is something for the slightly big, and I know this is kind of going against what we just said about playing with scrappy mana bases, but even with a good mana base, tapping your fetch land for mana, you feel a little bit smart when you do that.
Yeah. Your Dark Depths taps for mana.
Oh, yes, exactly. Let's go. Right, do you want to take it away with your next one, James?
Cool, yeah. So for my next one, I went for one. I really thought that the Scryfall page was going to load quickly enough to catch up with that. Oh no, I was opening a lore page about the Elder Spell as a concept rather than the actual card. Okay, we're going to try that again.
No, this is all staying in. No, it's fine. No.
Okay, so for my next one, I've gone for a card that I think is viewed as pretty niche. I'm here to tell you it's less niche than you think it is. I've gone for the Elder Spell. It is black for a sorcery. Destroy any number of target planeswalkers. Choose a planeswalker you control, put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. People play a decent amount of planeswalkers in Commander. You wouldn't put a card in your deck that just kills planeswalkers in general, but is if you also have a lot of planeswalkers, what you can do with this card is you get to ultimate your planeswalker way quicker than people think you do.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time, it's the ultimate that people actually care about. They're willing to let you hang about and get a bit of value, but they're not going to let you ultimate. This lets you just sometimes put like 6 loyalty counts on your planeswalkers and ultimate out of blue. I think this is basically an auto-include in any Super Friends deck if you can cast it. Because what you can do is you just kill like 3 of your little planeswalkers that you don't care about. Maybe you have a Narset that you can't activate anymore, or a Saheeli Ryan of this cheap planeswalker, and then you go ultimate to my 5-mana Teferi. You guys all lose the game because you're not going to have any permanents anymore. And it really getting to do that out of the blue, it's a pretty unique effect. There's not that many ways outside of like you can proliferate, but you have to proliferate a lot generally. Whereas if you kill 2 planeswalkers with this, that's 4 loyalty. That basically gets you to ultimate on most planeswalkers. You can even ultimate with the turn you enter a lot of the time, and get to an ultimate that will often win the game. Now, I'm not saying it's a great card. It's pretty situational. It requires some setup, or you get lucky and your opponents to be playing decks with a lot of walkers. But when it works, it's phenomenal.
So yeah, I was going to ask, like, is this a bit of a meta call? Like, would you say?
I think it gets better if you know that your opponents are playing a bunch of planeswalkers. I think I have definitely seen decks where I was like, I would put the Elder Spell in that deck, even if I knew that none of my opponents had a single planeswalker in their deck. I'd just be in for kill my 2 planeswalkers that I don't care about. Ultimate the one I do that wins the game.
No, actually, yeah, that's a very good point. That kind of play pattern is very scary. Yeah, people won't be expecting that because you could be kind of down ticking some planeswalkers to protect the big cool explosive one, and then pop it off on one turn.
Yeah, exactly.
That's quite scary.
Yeah, it's not fantastic. It's pretty situational. You need to set it up, but it's a cool, like, powerful swingy play. And obviously, if you do play in a play group where people play a lot of planeswalkers, then this is just going to be great, and you can put it in decks with more normal amounts of planeswalkers rather than like all in Super Friends decks that are all about it. It is worth noting, if you're Elder Spelling some of your planeswalkers in order to try and ultimate another one of your planeswalkers, be careful if your opponents have open mana. You don't want to go Elder Spell 2 of my planeswalkers. In response, they kill the only remaining planeswalker. That doesn't work out for you. So use with caution into a lot of open mana. But it can be a really fun card. It's definitely worth a try. Not the most powerful card on the list, but has some upside.
No, I like it. Yeah, that seems very cool. From one spell that might be powerful to my next choice, which I'm gonna say is not super powerful, but it is synergistic. My next card is Diligent Farmhand. It is a single green for a creature human druid. It is a 1/1. You may pay 1 green to sacrifice Diligent Farmhand and search your library for a basic land, put that card onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle. And the very irrelevant text, I'm assuming 99% of the time, if Diligent Farmhand is in your graveyard, effects from spell named Muscle Burst count it as a card named Muscle Burst. So ignore the Muscle Burst part. That's a card that kind of it's like a pump spell that kind of does more when there's more of the cards named Muscle Burst in the graveyard. Kind of what's the blue spell that does something similar?
Accumulated Knowledge.
That's it. So yeah, so Muscle Burst is kind of what green got, I guess, from the cycle. But anyway, ignore that. We are here because this is effectively your second copy of Sakura Tribe Elder. For the decks where you want to be putting things into your graveyard, this is a very easy way of getting a creature into the graveyard while also ramping you. It is not super flashy. It is not as good as Steve. Actually, it's only 1 mana more than Steve. But to just have another version of this effect, I think is quite nice. I end up playing this quite a lot. Like at its base level, it's slightly more for a rampant growth. I admit that that's not where you want to be at all the time, but in the decks that specifically care about number of creatures in the graveyard, I would go so far as saying that this is basically an auto-include, for me anyway. But if your deck cares about number of creatures in the graveyard, you should be playing Diligent Farmhand on top of Secure Tribe-Elder. That's my humble opinion. What do you think, James? What do you think of my human druid lad?
It looks pretty cool, actually. Although I'll point out it's not a druid it's not a human on the printing I'm looking at. I guess it's been
Oracle. Oracle.
Okay.
We're good.
Yeah. No, it looks pretty good, actually. It's not a card I've played with very much, but I mean, it is 1 mana more total than Steve, but 1 + 2 is a lot less than 3 in Magic math. It is the same as Steve if you have it in your opening hand most of the time, right? If you weren't doing anything else on 1, you play this on 1, crack it on 2. It plays out very similarly. And yes, Coach Ribelda's a fantastic card that goes in most green decks. I think you need a reason to play this over Rampant Growth, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because it does also have the downside that if you draw this a bit later and you need to get a land drop, but it has a turn delay, and that's pretty unfortunate. But I can certainly see playing it in some graveyard decks.
No, great. And also, your opponents will wonder what you're up to when they start reading the Muscle Burst text. Like, it is basically flavor, but they will be like, ooh, what's he up to? What is this? What are they up to with the Muscle Burst? But yeah.
It does sound like you need to build a Muscle Burst deck.
I can only have, like if Muscle Burst was one of the cards that you could have multiples, I probably would have done it, but because I've spoken about it quite a bit, I'll read Muscle Burst for you. Muscle Burst is 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is 3 plus the number of Muscle Burst cards in your graveyard. So this makes a creature a 4/4 if you cast a Muscle Burst and have a Diligent Farmhand in the graveyard. That's pretty tech. For 2 mana, James. Wow.
Got him. No one will expect it. Even if they read Diligent Farmhand, because they still won't know what Muscle Burst does.
No.
Cool. Next up, I have a card from Khans of Tarkir. I've gone for Villainous Wealth.
I love this card, James.
Oh, yes, it's so much fun. This is a X black, green, blue. So X and a Sultai for a sorcery. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of non-land cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. This is a really good thing to do with a lot of mana. Like, you don't want to be like Villainous Wealthing them for 3 or 4. That's not how this is not how we play this card. This wants to be like 7 or 8, really. But it will generally win you the game when you do, and you'll have some fun along the way. It's a phenomenal amount of value, and at the point where X gets up into the 7, 8, 9 range, it tends to actually be a mana advantage as well, because you're casting so many cards for free. Be careful who you choose to target with this. It's you don't want to generally target the player who's playing a very all-in synergy-based deck, because a lot of their cards are not going to be strong enough individually, and even if you Villainous Wealth into 2 or 3 of them that kind of work together, it's probably they're not going to work with the cards in your deck. So you generally want to target someone who you think is going to have like powerful standalone cards, ideally. But really, at the point where you're casting this for enough mana, it often doesn't matter. It is also worth noting, as with all these theft effects, if you Villainous Wealth someone and take a bunch of their powerful creatures and start killing everyone with them, when that player dies, their creatures will stop existing, will go to exile.
Yeah, you just killed them last. It's fine.
Exactly. Yes, you just be careful you kill them last, and keep them alive. Keep them alive to keep serving your purpose as long as necessary to kill everyone else. But this card's a ton of fun. I will say though, I played a lot of Commander over webcam on during lockdown. I would not recommend resolving this card over webcam.
Oh yeah, no. No.
That does not work well. You do need to be at a physical table where you can pick up your opponent's cards. But this card's really sweet. I have a blast every time I cast it, I would say.
All right, real talk. What's the most you've ever villainous 12 someone for?
Oh, I've definitely got into the 20s before.
Nice. I'll be honest. I had a Sultai Elves list before with like my gold bordered Gaia's Cradle in it. I think I've done this for like 60.
Oh wow! Okay,
like you are just sending someone to the Shadow Realm at that point. Like,
yeah, that'll do it.
But yeah, I love them as well. Like yeah. I guess the biggest part is just kind of just is because they all come in at the same time, just like working out the triggers, kind of similar to Genesis Wave when you cast that for a bunch of mana. Just the main thing is just working out the triggers, just like, but yeah, take your time, you'll get through it, it'll be all right. Yeah, I love them as well. It's a House of a Magic card. I'm going to move on to my next one now. We have another green card. I'm going to be talking about Bower Passage. It is 1 green for an enchantment. Creatures with flying can't block creatures you control. So this goes in a few niche type of decks. Like this is one I'm jamming in every deck. But I think I spoke about kind of like the Flying Men deck earlier. This is also fantastic in any kind of big dragons deck because this card is like 25p, and it effectively means all your big dumb dragons are unblockable because yes, okay, creatures with reach can still block them, but generally speaking, there's a lot less creatures with reach out there than there are just creatures naturally with flying. And just being able to, again, just ways of giving your board unblockable. I really like it, turns out. There's 2 of them on here. Actually, no, there's 3. There's one coming later. Damn, okay. But yeah, this doesn't go in every deck, but any deck where I'm playing flying creatures that is, I guess, running green. Kind of like Jund or 5-color dragons, or even like Team of Dragons. This would be really good in there. And yeah, kind of like an Edric Flying Men deck. Like anything that kind of wants to be getting through for damage using flying creatures. This card is phenomenal. It basically makes your whole board unblockable for just 2 mana, and people really are really just don't expect it, and it's quite tricky to deal with because it's on an enchantment. All that kind of adds up to a pretty solid card for quite a small cost.
Yeah, no, seems like an interesting. I don't think I've ever played with or against this card, but I could see how it could win some games.
It is phenomenal in my Karthus deck. It's the main way that the people don't die in that deck is they have flying blockers, and this just counteracts so much of that.
Yeah. You do need people not to be killing your creatures.
That's it. It's fine. You just play more dragons, James.
Okay, as always, just play more dragons.
Exactly. That's always the solution.
Certainly a game plan. Yeah.
Everything will be fine.
Yeah. Okay, keep calm and play more dragons.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, seems cool. All right, for my next one, I've gone for. So I think people used to be. I think actually this kind of used to be a pet card, but now everyone plays it. I think people have woken up on it a bit. Is Satyr Wayfinder. So this is 1 green for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, put a land from among them into your hand, and the rest go into your graveyard. This just does a lot of little things that matter for 2 mana. Like 2 mana, it replaces itself with a land. It doesn't have to be a basic land. So it's nice with it gets all of your utility lands. It's going to fix your colors really well. Plus, it puts a lot of cards in your graveyard and leaves you with a 1/1 in play. And so obviously it doesn't ramp you, but there are upsides to the fact that the 1/1 isn't like an elf that taps for mana. It's just a guy sitting there in play. You've already got your value. Means that it's a really good thing to sacrifice, or just a chump block with, maintain your life total. Any green deck that either is interested in filling up its graveyard or just having some disposable bodies lying around. I don't need much of an excuse to put Slater Wayfinder in my deck, but so it's probably in there.
No, exactly. Like, if I'm honest, there's a lot of my decks that I build, like Slater Wayfinder is one of the first cards on the list. Like it's easy. A lot of the decks I build are either starting with a Slater Wayfinder or a Wild Mongrel, something like that. Just some way of filling up the bin. Yeah, I love this card, and yeah, I am not known for playing competitive formats, but this is, I think, I was it a modern deck? I'm sure I played this in something else, but like, I'm sure. I don't know. Pauper. I have played this lad in Pauper. Love it there. Yeah, again, doing some dumb graveyard stuff. But as you said, if you want to be filling up your graveyard, I think Slater Wayfinder is a fantastic choice. Also, yeah, it's just being on a creature. Again, so many of the Graveyard Matters decks care about number of creatures in the graveyard, and this just does all that. Yeah, I love this card.
I didn't expect to have to sell you on
no,
Slater Wayfinder, really.
Phenomenal choice.
At the point where you had, was it 6 Sultai decks, how many of them do you think had Slater Wayfinder in them?
All of them.
Excellent,
like, probably
excellent
every
choice.
single one. Right. We're keeping it green. I will pick some other colours in a minute, but I couldn't not put this card on here. Coming up next from me is Rites of Flourishing. It is 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. And then also, each player may play an additional land on each of their turns. So this is kind of the epitome of kind of like group hug. Like, kind of everyone gets to do stuff. But in theory, your deck will take most advantage out of this. Like, this is probably one of the cheapest ways of playing additional lands per turn. And the additional card draw is nice. The reason why this is on my pet list is when I first started playing Commander, we would basically be in pods where like 3 of the 4 players would have one of these in the deck. So I have played many games of Magic. Like this card just reminds me of early Commander. Like there's a lot of nostalgia with this card, but basically, yeah, I have played games where there's like 3 of these in play, and everyone's just doing stuff. Like everyone's having fun. Yes, some people are probably breaking it a bit more, and by that I mean like the blue players who aren't playing Rites of Flourishing, that kind of stuff. But yeah. In decks, we're kind of like green isn't really known for its card draw. I still quite like this in 2023 in a mono green deck where you care about lands and that kind of stuff. Like you obviously get the ability to play an additional land on the turn you play this, but everyone else does get to draw their card before you because it's at the beginning of each player's draw step. That is definitely a downside, but if people kill you, they lose the Rites of Flourishing. So it's a good little way of kind of keeping yourself in the game. So I have a big soft spot for this card.
Yeah, this one's interesting. This is a card that I have never put in a Commander deck and probably will never put in a Commander deck.
Boo, James, boo.
But I don't think it's a bad card at all. I just can't shake off. I mean, I started Magic playing a lot of Limited, and I just still can't quite... And obviously, the way you build Commander decks is entirely different. So it doesn't really matter, but I still can't quite shake off that why am I helping my opponents this much? And don't need to be that nice of a guy.
It's a symmetrical effect. As we know, symmetrical effects are always fair.
Yeah, but I spent 3 mana on a card.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but you got to play an extra land. I know.
No, I do acknowledge it has some good hopes. I don't think it's a bad card. Cool. Well, my next one, we are back to the flashy enchantments. I've gone for Fires of Invention. So people might remember this card from Standard a while ago. It had a pretty good run, or currently quite well as you played in Pioneer still. So Fires of Invention is 3 and a red for an enchantment. Says you can cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. So pretty big downside so far. However, it has a pretty phenomenal upside of you may cast spells with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana costs. This card lets you do some really broken turns. It certainly has some restrictions, and it doesn't go in every deck. The main thing you want with this card is other productive things to do with your mana that aren't casting spells. Because the way this card tends to play out is you play Fires, you play another spell, another 3 or 4 mana spell, whatever, how many lands you have. And at that point, you've not really gotten any mana out of it, right? Because you could have just cast your other spell. But the next turn, you're going to be able to cast 2 spells for free. But crucially, you still have all of your lands untapped. So if you have any activated abilities to spend mana on anything else productive at all to do with your mana, really, it's you're then going to really start going off because you're getting all of that mana back to do whatever else you want to do with it. So activated abilities that cost a lot of mana go really well with this card, especially repeatable ones. Also worth noting, if you have ways to like flicker out the Fire's Invention or get rid of it temporarily, you can go cast a spell, get rid of my Fire's Invention. I now have all my mana untapped and can continue to cast spells, which is pretty nice. But obviously it doesn't go in every deck. The not being able to play instant speed thing, if that hurts your game plan at all, then sure, don't play this. But if your deck has good mana sinks, it's I think it goes in a lot of places. There's also, I think, some nice upside of, I can't do anything on your turn anyway, so I can just go and get a drink. I can go, we're now free until it comes round to my turn again. I don't have to pretend to pay attention. You guys can work out what's going on.
Yeah, that's not nothing. Like generally, I do kind of think about your plays before it gets to your turn. But if you physically can't, or if you've been told by a card that you just wait until your turn, it's fine. Then I'm fully on board with that. Does this kind of go in like decks with something like 1,000-Year Elixir, like if it's like an activated ability type jobby?
Oh yeah, 100%. Freeing up all that mana lets you use all those really mana-intensive activated abilities really nicely. I have a Gen Arkham Weaver deck which uses both very well.
Phenomenal. Love that. Has this ever caught you out, I'm assuming, though? Like there must have been times when this has kind of bricked your deck a little bit, would you say? Is that possible?
I've definitely put it in a deck, played like one game with it and realized it didn't belong.
Right, that makes more sense, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a lot of cheap spells in your deck, like specifically cantrips, this really doesn't go well with. Because you don't want to be like, I'll cast my Ponder and now I can only cast one more spell this turn. You do kind of want all your spells to be impactful because you're not limited on mana, you're limited on how many spells can I cast. So like cheap, low impact stuff really doesn't go well with Fire's Invention. And obviously like counter spells and then speed removal don't go with it at all. But you do kind of want it to be you'd want to be playing a bunch of impactful stuff, not a bunch of elves, signets, cantrips. And it's also worth noting that if you're making a lot of mana but not by putting lands into play, then this might not help you. Because if you have 8 mana but only 4 of it is coming from lands, this is only going to let you cast 4 drops for free. Although you can actually still pay full retail on one of the spells if you want to. It doesn't say you can only cast spells with CMC less than the number of lands you have.
It's just the 2. Yeah. No, very good. Love that. I've realized I've kind of cheated again and gone for multiple. I'll pick one of them. This is part of the...
No, you can have both. You can have both.
Well, it's actually part of a cycle of 5. But I'll read out one of them.
You can't have 5. 5 is unacceptable.
So actually, I'll go with... let's keep this green train rolling. My next one is Treacherous Terrain. This is 6 a red and a green for a sorcery, which is a lot of mana, I will admit. But it has Treacherous Terrain deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of lands that player controls. But importantly, it also has basic land cycling for 2, which means you can pay 2 generic, discard this card, and search your library for a basic land, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So I love cycling. I think it's a fantastic mechanic. It just basically, it effectively kind of gives cards like dual modes, and This is part of a cycle of 5. I think is this allied or enemy? It's one of the two, but basically there's 5 of these. They're from one of the first 4-color commander decks, in 2016, and these are fantastically versatile. They are cheap cards. I think I like Treacherous Terrain the most because it has the most impact. Kind of early game, if you just need to get a land, pay 2, land cycle this, go and fix yourself in your 3+ color deck. It'll do that. But then also, yes, it is 8 mana, but by the time you're casting this, it could just be killing players. Like green ramp decks or green X ramp decks, the ones that are kind of just putting loads of land into play, are sometimes need to be checked, basically. It is kind of like as land destruction isn't super much of a thing because of the social contract in Commander, there aren't too many ways of kind of keeping those players in check, and Treacherous Terrain definitely does that. You can really punish people who've been overly greedy with the rampant whips and this kind of stuff. If I'm honest, it's just the versatility. Early it fixes you. Late game, it could kill someone. I think that's really good for a card that's less than 20p or so. And yeah, if you're in a multicolored deck, I would highly recommend trying the rest of the cycle out too.
Yeah, no, I really like this card. I 100% agree. I think lands players get an easy ride because Armageddon is not considered fun. No one's mad about you casting Damnation and killing all the creatures. And I agree, by the way, but Armageddon isn't very fun. But I think this sort of effect, shout out to Price of Progress as well, does a lot of good work in this spot. In this respect, I think punishing people putting 1 million lands into play is definitely a good spot to be. There's a lot of that does go on in Commander, I find, and quite good against the Rites of Flourishing deck.
Oh no, wait, boo. I picked the wrong one. I meant to talk about Migratory Roots, which makes you birds. That's what I meant to talk about. Don't worry.
You can talk about that one too.
No, all good. Yeah, as I was saying, there is a cycle of these. They all do different things kind of involved with the colors. So the Gruul one does stuff with lands. The Spellsy ones make birds, that kind of stuff. But the Dimir one mills you, which we do love. So yeah, check out all these cards. I think they're really solid, especially in kind of budget builds or lower power level. These are perfect at doing the thing that you want to do. They will just help you out.
Yeah, and if you're a lot of colors, this is a good way to fix without putting do nothing cards in your deck, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. So for my next one, I have gone for Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. So this is a legendary sorcery. So for people who don't know what legendary sorceries do, they're sorceries, but you can only cast them if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. So a little bit conditional right out of the gates, but it is a very powerful effect. So Yawgmoth's Vile Offering is 4 and a black for a legendary sorcery. It says, put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Exile Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. So this is kill the best thing your opponents have, get back the best thing from any graveyard. This is super high impact. It's this is gonna swing most board states to your favor. The fact that it hits anyone's graveyard is really nice. It means you don't actually really have to do any work putting things in the graveyard. You do have to do work making sure you have a legendary creature or planeswalker, because you're not going to be able to cast a card otherwise. But you know what's legendary is your commander.
Yep.
So just having a cheap commander goes a long way with this. If your commander costs 2 or 3 mana, you're just going to it's not going to be hard to find a spot where you're going to be able to cast this. I wouldn't play it if you have no other legends in your deck, but that's just never the case now. Legendary creatures are really, really good. There's loads of them. I think if you have a decent concentration of legends and a cheapish commander, Yawgmoth's Vile Offering is going to be a pretty good inclusion for your deck. It's just a super high impact card. Really, really swingy, and scales really well into the late game. So it'll probably be something huge in one of your 3 opponent's graveyards by that point.
Yeah, exactly. It's Commander. People are playing big, dumb, stupid spells. This takes them from your opponents and turns them against them. But also, like, yeah, as it says any graveyard, it does mean that you can just, this goes quite nicely in like a reanimated deck or something like that you're running. So
yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Right. So my next card. So we've gone through the green section of my list. Now we're going firmly back into graveyard matter stuff. My next card is Wonder. It is 3 and a blue for a creature incarnation. It is a 2/2 with flying. As long as Wonder is in your graveyard and you control an island, creatures you control have flying. So this is a card which is obviously better in blue X graveyard decks, where you can be like tutoring this into the graveyard, or you can discard it. You have some self-mill where you're automatically putting it in. But to be fair, like if you are just a blue deck with big creatures, like there is a world where you just cast this, you block with it, and then all your stuff is flying. Like the graveyard is, people do run graveyard hate, unfortunately. Boo all of those people, leave me alone. Basically, the fact this doesn't have to be on the battlefield to do this effect, like you actually don't want it on the battlefield. Like it doesn't die to removal. It's there's very few things that can really deal with this once it's turned on. Then just your whole board having flying, again, just giving you all that evasion. You're in such a good position when you have Wander out and it's turned on, and then like, yeah, all you need is it in the graveyard. You do need an island, which has definitely caught me up in some of those dodgy Sultai mana bases that I was talking about earlier. But when the two come together, you're just in a very good position. And yeah, I love Wonder. I didn't know it was modern legal. I'm assuming it's obviously not good enough for modern, but you know.
Yeah, I think got in one of Horizon sets, right? Disappointingly, no anger to go with it in the Horizon set. That would have been phenomenal.
Also, no Psychotog, but I think that's a conversation for another time.
I think Commander is maybe the format for Psychotog now. Yeah, no, I really like Wonder. I really like this whole cycle of incarnations. Actually, I think they're all really cool. And quite agree. No one should ever interact with your graveyard. It's very rude.
Yeah, it's sacrilegious. Yes.
Yeah.
It should be as frowned upon as land destruction. That's the goal of this podcast from now on.
Yeah. So next up, I've got this one probably shouldn't be on my list, but I really enjoy it when it works. I've gone for Mana Tithe. It's so fun when you get to Mana Tithe someone's 10-drop in a game of Commander. Now, this is probably like better actually if you're playing a more high-powered version of you're playing in a more high-powered play group, because the early turns are going to matter more. Everyone's going to be more mana efficient. But in reality, in most pods, people tap out all the time because they, people play X spells, people play loads of expensive stuff. They finally hit their 8th mana to play their huge fatty, and you just get to answer it for 1 mana. And sure, like Swords to Plowshares does that theoretically for creatures, but in reality it doesn't. All the creatures people play are going to get some amount of value on the way in or when they die for when you're talking about expensive ones. Whereas Mana Tithe is unique in white, where it gets you to actually lets you interact with that. Having said that, like, obviously it's very situational. You probably shouldn't put this in as many decks as I do, but it's a lot of fun when you get to Mana Tithe people, so it goes in for me. And not everyone enjoys it. I can respect that. I understand you might not enjoy being on the receiving end, but I had fun, and so I'm fine with it, to be honest.
No, exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like people are used to their spells being countered by like the blue mage. It's just when you're, I think the more tilting part is when kind of like the mono white ETB flicker or like beatdown deck or like Death and Taxes deck kind of just like no wait, Mana Tithe. Like, do you pay the 1? But this time it's countered. Yeah, I like Mana Tithe. I think it has it has a place. Like people get greedy. Like again, kind of like we've gone over. Like this really stops a card like Villainous Wealth, something like that. Like where people are dumping all their mana into something, tapping out. They never expect the tithe, James.
And no one ever expects a tithe. Especially, I will say it's much worse if you're also playing blue. You shouldn't play this card probably because
Oh no,
I mean,
definitely.
A,
Yeah.
you just have better options, but B, people like might think you have counter spells. Whereas if you're outside of blue, no one expects it.
Yeah, like this and like oddly, I think this is going to be like weirdly stronger in something like Abzan. Something kind of a bit more like mono white. They might be they're thinking of white cards, but when you're kind of in like a multicolor deck, no one is thinking Manatide, and I'm sure you could really get some people.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think the best Manatide situation is when your opponent taps out, casts their spell, you Manatide it, and then they sort of shamefacedly then play a land.
Yes, beautiful. Got them,
Yeah.
James. Got them.
Yeah.
All right, so my penultimate card. Again, we're firmly in the graveyard train now. We are going for a card that was in the first ever Magic deck I ever got as a kid. We're talking about Phyrexian Reclamation. This is a single black for a enchantment. 1 black, pay 2 life, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm not. It's hard to say if this is like a pet card because I do think this is played in a lot of Commander decks because it's just repeatable recursion. Like if you have this, effectively, this means your commander becomes 1 black and 2 life to return from your graveyard to your hand rather than the escalating cost of commander decks, plus all the other creatures that are going to be going to your graveyard in the course of a game of Commander as well. But I am sticking by this as a pet card because it was in the first deck I ever got. The copy is literally in a frame behind my head. Like this is like the epitome of a pet card that is actually good in Commander. Like I have Rancor from that deck as well, but that one less good in Commander. But yeah, I love Phyrexian Reclamation. It's just 2 life to just bring anything back. It's just really solid. Like you start with 40 life, you have so much uses for this card. Any utility creature, like combo creature, just anything that you want to get back, you have access to. And again, it's on an enchantment, which just means it's of all the permanents, less likely for it to be mucked up. And yeah, I love this card. I play it in most black decks, even the ones I probably shouldn't play it in.
Oh yeah, no, this card's super strong. It's you can never run out of gas. Your opponents can't really deal with your stuff because it's just going to keep coming back. Yeah, really good card.
Nice. Do you want to take it away with your last card of the day, James?
Cool, yeah. Final one for me is Ghostly Flicker. I imagine most people know what this one does, but for those who don't, this is 2 and a blue for an instant. You exile 2 target artifacts, creatures, and/or lands you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under your control. Obviously, this is phenomenal in like a dedicated Flicker deck where you're just all ETB creatures, but even outside of that, it has some pretty good uses. Like, firstly, it just protects your stuff from removal. It you can chump block and Flicker. And realistically, most decks have like a decent chunk of ETB stuff. Like it doesn't belong in every deck, but the fact that it's quite flexible, it can hit artifacts as well, which is really nice. Lands comes up less often, but not 0. Yeah, this just has some pretty nice upside. I build a lot of I guess I just put a lot of value creatures and artifacts in my deck, but I do tend to wind up including this one in like a lot of my blue decks. There's also an interesting interaction with it where most of these cards say return to the battlefield under its owner's control. Ghostly Flicker says under your control. So if you can threaten their creature, for example, like play threaten or an act of treason, whatever, attack them with it, then Ghostly Flicker, you do get to keep the creature permanently, which is kind of nice.
Well, that's pretty spicy.
Yeah.
I like that.
But yeah, it just does a lot, you know. You can also, if you only actually have one creature you want to flicker, you can also just flicker a land as well, so which like gives you a mana back essentially. Which is pretty nice because the land comes back untapped. So yeah, I just find this card, even in the decks where you're not super about the flickering, you just have like a decent amount of value stuff. I find like there's normally a spots in the games where just plays out really well, and you can get a lot of value.
No, exactly. And the fact that this also is a form of protection. Like, you can do this in response to someone using like some instant speed removal on your creature. That spell then fizzles because your creature's blinked out, and then by the time it comes back in, their kill spell is resolved already and has missed it. Yeah, it's a fantastic card. Yeah, it's just, as you said, the flexibility, it just does so many things. And like the land one won't come up that often, but there will be times when, like, I mean, I know Talion Academy isn't in nowhere near legal in Commander, but there's definitely lands that can kind of like generate more mana than they tap for. Like, there's got to be
your Gaia's Cradle.
That's exactly.
Could certainly be a thing. I need to buy a Gaia's Cradle first, but
that's the one. That's the one drawback to that plan. But
yeah. It's very easy to buy Ghostly Flicker. It's a common from Everson restored. Gaia's Cradle harder,
but only printed 3 times. I find that very strange. Actually, I assumed this would be like a card that's been printed to death, but maybe it was just in a modern master set I randomly opened a lot of. But
yeah, I'm surprised it's not in a million different Commander precons, honestly.
No, exactly. All right, let's move on to my last card and the last card of the day. If you've made it this far, it being a graveyard card will in no way near surprise you. We're talking about Living Death. It is 3 black for a sorcery. Each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyards, then sacrifices all creature cards they control, then put all cards they exile this way onto the battlefield. So this is kind of everything I want to do in Magic, and if anything, it basically is like the sum of all the cards that I have spoken about today. Maybe with your Wonders in the graveyard, maybe a Champion of Landbots in the graveyard, you're getting it all back into play. But yeah, I love Living Death. It is a board wipe. It gets around indestructible creatures because it exiles them, but more importantly, it basically just completely upends the game. Like, you're playing this in a deck where you have just spent the bulk of the game filling up your lovely graveyard. It's brimming with good value creatures, brimming with goodness. You play this, and then you're in a better position from your opponents. Your opponents will maybe have a couple of creatures. Like, yes, that's fine. Like, creatures do die in games of Commander. That happens. They'll have maybe 2 or 3 creatures. You'll bring back 20. There have been some downsides with this. I have lost games before by having too many creatures in my graveyard, and when they all came in, I drew too many cards and ended up losing a game to draw triggers. But if I'm going to go out, that is as good a way as any, as far as I'm concerned.
Just put a Thassa's Oracle in your Living Death deck.
I think this was before Thoracle got printed. I think I think with that deck, I was umming and ahhing about Laboratory Maniac.
Yeah, that one does it too.
But yeah, I love Living Death, and again, this is just generically. I think people think of this as a strong card. I know I do, but I love this card.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely it's pretty situational, right? And you need to be aware. You need to be pretty aware of what your opponents are getting when you cast this card. It does go really well with. I know you have a moral opposition to Graveyard Hate, but if you but you can Bajuka Bog the opponent with the scariest graveyard and then cast this.
Oh yeah, no, I'm fine. Like, I'm a massive hypocrite. It's fine when I do it to other people. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I am full on board being a massive hypocrite. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. If you if you have a couple of ways to take out the scariest graveyard, that's quite nice with this card. If you're not winning on the spot. But I really like Living Death. I think it's really cool, and just a very unique Magic card,
No, exactly. Yeah. Not much does stuff like this. Yeah, it's really fun. Awesome. Right. That was a good list, James. We both have several bangers on there. I'm very impressed with both of us. Right, so before we get you all out of here, let's move on to our final section of the day. What have we been playing recently? I'll quickly do me, because mine's going to be a little bit shorter than James's, because I basically I've just been busy, man. Like the last couple of weekends, instead of like cubing or commandering, I've just been it's summertime. Been to a couple of gigs. Went to a all-day festival. Saw The Offspring. Very good. Dating myself a little bit there, but it was awesome. I had a lovely time. The main thing I've been playing is like a mono black version of Dan Dan that I've made. I have released a longer video on this on the Too Sweet MTG YouTube channel. If it sounds interesting, check it out. For those who aren't aware what Dan Dan is like a shared library format where basically both players are playing with the same deck and there's a shared graveyard as well. What Dan Dan does really well is it kind of uses there's a lot of play around the kind of like the top of the graveyard, and there's a lot of tempo swings back and forth. It's very interactive. Because it's got a shared library, it makes cards like Memory Lapse, which is a counter spell that puts the countered spell on top of your library. It kind of adds extra play with that. But the one area that kind of I think it could be improved upon is it doesn't really use the graveyard, and the version I have made uses a lot of it. So the creature that it uses is a creature called Barrow Ghoul. 1 black for a creature zombie. It is a 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Barrow Ghoul unless you exile the top creature card of your graveyard. And then it also uses cards like Misinformation, which is a single black for an instant, to put up to 3 target cards from an opponent's graveyard on top of their library in any order. Yeah, and uses cards like Misinformation to muck up the graveyard as people are trying to fill it up, to try and fuel up your Barrow Ghouls. The other bit that's a bit nice about it, and again, I go into more detail in this in the video, but basically it also uses things like hand attack to try and get people to discard cards to fuel the graveyards. But there's some kind of punishment spells in there. We have like Loxodon Smiter in there, which you put into play if someone makes you discard it. So there's kind of an element of like not gambling, but kind of like an element of risk basically involved with it as well. Like it's been a ton of fun. It's basically been the main bit of Magic I've been playing recently. It's just me and the wife, like on a sunny day, we'll sit in the garden and just play that for an hour or two. It's been a lot of fun. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I need to give you a game at some point, James.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I'd be up for that. It's also great having like little shared deck games like that, because you can just keep them, and if people are around and don't have Magic cards with them, you can just play it as like a board game, and it's not like something that needs to be kept up to date, right? It's you could just keep it around, and it'll keep being fun. Yeah, it sounds really cool actually. I like adding that graveyard thing to Dan Dan. I've only played a little bit of Dan Dan, but it definitely seems like an interesting space.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Yeah. There'll be a link down in the description of this podcast and in the show notes to a video where I kind of go into in a bit more detail and kind of I'll also put a link to the deck list itself down there below. It's actually quite reasonably priced. It's only about like 20 quid, about $25, something like that. So yeah, nice and reasonable, nice and cheap, and yeah, good interactive, wholesome graveyard-based fun. But James, you've been fairly busy. You've been playing a lot of Magic recently from the list of things. Like, yeah, how have your weeks been recently?
Yeah, pretty good. So, well, I was certainly playing a lot of Magic Online whilst the Cube was up, which was a lot of fun. To follow up on we did a whole discussion of the Cube changes. I think they played out really, really well, actually. The sacrifice stuff specifically was a lot better than I was expecting it to be anyway. And then more recently, last weekend, I played a Pioneer RCQ, which I was quite unprepared for. I hadn't played, by which I mean, I think I played one league with the deck like 2 months ago. But I was playing Indomitable Creativity in Pioneer, but it's the you can Indomitable Creativity into a variety of things in Pioneer. You can creativity into Atraxa, you can creativity into World Spine Worm and try and kill them that way. The version I was playing was casting Indomitable Creativity, hitting Torrential Gearhulk. So the way this works is you have 4 copies of Magma Opus in your deck, which is a 8-mana sorcery, which kills some things, draws some cards, taps some permanents, very powerful. But it also has the ability of you can pay 2 mana and discard it to create a treasure. The treasure then gives you something to target with Indomitable Creativity. You then hit your Trench or Gearhulk, and the Gearhulk can cast Flashback from Magma Opus and gets you very far ahead. The reason I like this version a lot, and I played a lot with this version, it would be around a year ago now, where we qualified for Sophia, the regional championship there. The reason I like this version is it's a much better deck when you don't draw creativity. A lot of the other creativity decks feel like you really need to draw creativity to get ahead, whereas this, you can. Trench or Gearhulk is very castable. It's only 6 mana, and obviously the treasures help you accelerate into it. So it has a much better game plan when you don't draw creativity, and it plays very well at instant speed, which is very valuable, I'd say, right now in the way Pioneer's set up. It's a very interactive format at the moment. And I find the other creativity decks kind of just make you jam your creativity into that interaction, because that's the only way you can get ahead, whereas this one can play a really good instant speed game, sit back on counter spells and interaction, and when your opponent taps out, then you can go for a Gearhulk in end step, or if they tap out and pass the turn, you can creativity in your turn. So yeah, the deck played pretty well. Finished 4-2 in the end, lost to winning in for top 8 with Alexander Gordon-Brown, very good UK Magic player. He's playing a Fires of Invention deck to great effect. But yeah, I had a lot of fun playing the event, actually. I'll probably be playing more Pioneer in the coming weeks, I think. The deck feels like a lot of fun. I definitely didn't have the most tuned version. I think there's definitely some improvements to be made to it, for sure.
Nice. I'm assuming you're excited that Magnum Opus is now back on the menu. I remember you really enjoying that deck, when you were playing it about a year or so ago.
Yeah, for sure. So I played it a lot in the run-up to the regional championship, and the thing that sort of pushed me off it previously was the printing of Shieldred. It's a very difficult card for that deck to deal with having the 5 toughness, and the deck draws a lot of cards, so Shieldred does kill you pretty quickly. The thing I didn't have in that deck, though, was kind of specifically the card Divide by 0, which is bounce a spell or permanent, and then you learn. And it's a really good deck, actually, for bounce spells, because you don't need to deal with threats permanently. You just need to get them off the board, because your late game is good enough that you can get ahead and kill them pretty quickly. So that's just also plays very similarly to a counter spell in a lot of spots. So yeah, that was a really nice innovation. Whoever came up with that, I shamelessly net decked and just made a few tweaks. But yeah, no, I think the deck plays pretty well, actually, at the moment. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly the creativity deck. I feel like I have the best game playing. I think the other ones have some merits as well, but yeah, there's a wide variety of things to Indomitable Creativity into, and I think they all have some upsides. But I've been liking the Gearhulks a lot.
No, awesome. Yeah. Good to see Gearhulk back as well. That's always been a very, very dumb Magic card. Yeah, it just lets you cheat on mana. So yeah, being able to cast something big with it, we love that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, so I think that is going to do us for the day. James, thank you again. Always a pleasure, dude.
Yeah, thank you very much. Always fun chatting, and look forward to next week chatting about some Lord of the Rings cards for Cube.
Yeah, let's go. As I said, I'm super hyped for that. Yeah, do make sure you like the podcast. I guess I still need to work out if people subscribe or follow. Let's say follow the podcast, please. It'd be greatly appreciated. Give us a 5-star review if you've enjoyed it. It all helps everything out. But yeah, just leaves me to say thank you all very much for listening. It's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from James.
Goodbye.
And we'll see you all next time. Take care.